Pistol Pete's Basketball Diaries are brought to you by the official Pistol Pete website, Pistol Pete 23. Go to Pistol Pete 23 and learn more about the legend.
Want to learn more about Pistol Pete? Read Pistol, The Life of Pete Maravich by best-selling author Mark Kriegel, a book critics are calling mesmerizing, transcendent, and sensational. Pistol, The Life of Pete Maravich, wherever books are sold.
I tell you, there's such a thing as the law of averages. Pistol will have to cool off pretty soon because he has not missed too many shots this season.
I think he defies that law and a few others sometimes. Maravich. Boy, he's got all kinds of moves. What move does this guy have, Kel? Up front to Jimmy McMillan. He drives. Off the glass, no good. Coleman rebounds. That was fine defense by Maravich. Another steal.
I don't know how you stop him. He is too much.
Kel, I don't know about you, but I'm running out of things to say about Maravich. It's good.
Mark, they're in basketball country. They reached the top. This is supposed to be the best of times for this family.
Well, in basketball terms, it certainly looks like it. In 1965, Press takes over for Everett Case as the head coach of North Carolina State. He takes a severely undermanned team and wins the ACC championship. It's one of the greatest coaching jobs in the history of ACC basketball.
Coach of the year.
He's a near unanimous selection as ACC coach of the year.
NCAA tournament team.
Well, they beat Duke.
Yeah.
For the ACC championship. But, you know, Press's team has two guys who can dunk. Duke is loaded with future pros. It's a wonderful coaching job, and he does it by preaching ensemble basketball, team defense.
All the things he doesn't instill in Pete.
At the same time, Pete is really coming into his own now. Pete is drawing notices in a way that he couldn't have in South Carolina. There's right before Christmas, Press's players gather for a pickup game, serious pickup games, okay? ACC players. And Pete joins in. And they take turns trying to beat on him. 2 hours, 3 hours. He can't miss. He can't miss. At the end of the game, two guys who play for Press go off to the side. They look at each other. And they say, this is in Reynolds Coliseum where NC State plays, by the way. They say, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah, kid's going to be the greatest it ever was. They both have the story. They both refer to this as the greatest game at Reynolds that no one has ever seen.
He had some shot that he created for that game.
The going down shot. And it would come back again. You know, they try to like pound on him for hours. Yeah. There's nothing they can do. And they're physically, they're bigger, they're stronger, but there's nothing they can do with him. And at the end of the game, he goes going down, and he tosses like a 35, 40-foot hook shot. Goes in, he goes right down, is a couple steps down to the locker room at Reynolds. He just goes right on in. And, you know, they're just left to be in awe.
But as good as this is getting, the family's unraveling.
Yes. Helen's starting to drink. The pressure is getting to everybody. They're caring. Press and Helen are now raising Ronnie's daughter. Ronnie's marriage falls apart. Ronnie goes off to Vietnam. And Press and Helen are left to care for the daughter of that marriage, Diana. And they raise her as their own. And in many ways, to me, this is the most ennobling thing about Press. He is a really, really solid father and mother to this girl. Because what he's doing is he's really serving as the primary parent, because Helen's starting to drink now.
Helen's drinking as a result of Press being away.
Well, Press
recruiting, coaching.
Press is recruiting, Press is coaching, Press is training Pete. You know, Pete would go from one practice to another. He would go from the high school gym to the North Carolina State gym. His whole life was practice. And when he diverged from that path, there was a price to pay. One day, you know, he shows up for a North Carolina State practice, and he would attend most of the North Carolina State practices with a black eye. One of Press's players said, "What happened to you?" And Press smelled beer on his breath. Press didn't want anything interfering with his plan, which was for Pete to play for state and for them to go down as the greatest father-son team in the history of the game.
And for him to make all that money.
And to make all the money, for him to set all the scoring records.
What kind of success was Pete having playing ball in high school?
It's very clear that Pete is one of the most sought-after recruits in the country. The thing is, everybody knows he's going to go play for his father.
Let's talk about that and more when we return. We'll be right back. Mark, the grand plan doesn't work out.
Well, it doesn't work out because Pete can't get into North Carolina State. You know, there were really no exceptions to the SAT requirement at the time. Pete kept falling a few points short. So the choice came down to West Virginia or an obscure school in the SEC, Louisiana State University.
How did LSU come about?
Well, the enterprising athletic director at LSU heard about a coach with a kid who was the greatest high school player in America. He said, you know, that would be a good thing. So it was a package deal. From the beginning, it was a package deal. Press got a contract for $15,000 a year, which was $5,000 more than he was making at NC State. It was, you know, on Press's terms, unheard of money. He thought it would give him financial freedom. But Pete didn't want to go. Pete wanted to go to West Virginia, be the next Jerry West.
Even after he couldn't get into NC State, that's where he wanted to go.
He really, you know, I think he understood it was the healthy thing for him to get away. And the coach there was Bucky Waters. He liked the offense. He liked the idea of becoming the next Jerry West.
Right.
You know, West Virginia was a basketball school.
Yes, it was.
And LSU was, you know, in basketball terms, lower than Clemson. Mm-hmm. You know, they played in a place called the Cow Palace, which was really for livestock.
The conference was lower than the ACC.
Well, there was Kentucky, there was everyone else, which is, you know, there was Kentucky, and a little bit Tennessee, and everyone else. But it was not a basketball conference. It was, again, it was a football school in a football conference.
And so Press took the job.
Press took
How
the
did
job.
he convince his son to go?
He said, if you don't go, don't ever come home. And Pete knew he was serious. Pete turns around and says, okay, well, if I'm going there, you get me a car. So Pete springs for a Volkswagen, which I guess is not a recruiting violation if you're giving it to your son.
Did they literally?
But interestingly enough, okay, Press, who always recruited Desire, this is the first blue chip talent he ever recruited. It was his own kid.
Right. He didn't get
and his last. There was nothing that was going to come between Press and his vision, which was coaching his son in college. But I'll tell you what, when the Maraviches got to Baton Rouge, everyone forgot it was a football school. Press comes out, his first press conference, typical Press. Where do you see my boy?
I remember about the first time we played Pete, when he came into town. Of course, we were all skeptical about how really good a player could be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can still see the headlines the next day after Pete had scored 55 or so to beat us. It said, Tulane is believers. And right. we became believers after that.
That's
so
exactly
from that
right.
point on, you know, we were all believers that Pete was the real thing.
Exactly.
He came in with his knees bothering him. He looked a little hobbled. Again, he sold out the place, mm-hmm. and it was packed, people sitting on the floors. And he went through us with 66 points, and it became Tulane versus Pete, basically,
exactly.
is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to try to hold him down as much as we could, what little we did. And that was the game where we all rotated. We took turns, and you just couldn't guard him the whole game.
You could not.
Because physically, the amount of effort that Pete exerted, defensively, you couldn't keep up with.
You could not.
Because he was in control of the ball so well.
Right. And
that was a tough game to play, and we had a good time with that.
Exactly.
Mark, so the two of them enter LSU. One is the head coach of the varsity, one is a freshman.
Thing is, freshmen were not eligible to play varsity ball at that time. So what happened is the freshman games became a happening. People would line up around the Ag Center, around the Cow Palace for hours waiting to get into the freshman games. And Pete would come out, he started scoring 50, 66 points one game. It's a sensation, you know. His hair is growing out a little bit at the time. Varsity game starts, people file out. You know, guys who played on the varsity team, remember, they walk in to the Ag Center, place is packed, they come out to shoot layups, everyone's leaving. But the whole focus was on Pete. And within that, the focus was on Pete's scoring. It was a way for everyone to keep count, for everyone to keep interested. And, you know, he averages over 43 points as a freshman. And it becomes clear that press, remember, a guy who was a great teacher of team basketball, a great teacher of basketball defense, becomes consumed with his son's scoring average. It's almost as if by setting the record, he can save the family, which is veering into more and more trouble.
But these contradictions go back endless years. They go right back
They're
to the
pretty
beginning.
consistent in everything.
John Wooden. They go back right to the beyond John Wooden, back earlier on in Pennsylvania. So he was consistent about his contradictions.
The rules did not apply to Pete. You know, and it was true for off the court behavior as well. You know, if you went out and had too good a time, the way you could cover yourself was to be out with Pete. At one point, press wants to suspend or expel certain guys on the team. And one of the assistants brings it to his attention, I don't think you can do that. Why not? Well, everyone was out with Pete. Okay, case closed. Next. He couldn't really discipline Pete because that would deaden his own ambition. And at that time, Press was trying to run a Division I program, which was, except for his own son, completely lacking in talent. He's raising a daughter almost all by himself at this time. Helen's getting worse and worse. He has a stepson off in Vietnam. You know, what does he have? What does he have to show that he was here? What does he have to show that he was a great basketball man? He has his son setting a scoring record that will stand forever and ever. There's also what we see now, a theme that will recur again and again, is there is an economic imperative for Pete to play the way he plays. The governor starts coming to the games. And the governor signs into law a plan that had been on the drawing boards for a long time for a new arena, the Assembly Center. You know, they've been playing in the Cow Palace. All of a sudden, Pete comes. They're going to play in the Assembly Center. They're going to build a whole new arena. Kids start playing basketball. Remember, this is football country. All of a sudden, fathers start like putting up basketball hoops in the driveway. You know, everybody wants to be like Pete. People are starting to steal his socks. You know, the famous floppy socks. They become souvenir items. Kids are imitating first all over the South and then all over the country.
When we come back, we'll look at Pistol Pete's sophomore year at LSU. We'll be right back.